Romantic poetry was written as a reaction to the type of poetry written in the Augustan age. Augustan poetry was overly ornamental and difficult to understand. In order to be a poet in the Augustan era, a person had to have a classical education, and the poetry was written about serious people doing serious things. So as we will see, Romantic poetry contrasted with this idea and was more or less a reaction to this thinking. The power of nature. This idea that nature provides a divine influence on society was very prominent in Romantic poetry. One of the Romantic poets who strongly emphasized this idea was William Wordsworth. There are other Romantic poets who stressed this idea as well, such as Samuel Coleridge, but many scholars believe Wordsworth was outstanding in his ability to combine nature with poetry. Wordsworth was born in Cockermouth, England in 1770. He was only 8 years old when his mother died. When this happened, he and his 3 brothers were sent to live with Anne Tyson. Tyson allowed the boys to roam the surrounding countryside at will. Wordsworth spent lots of time observing nature. He also did a lot of reading. Some scholars believe this is likely where Wordsworth began to develop his strong appreciation for nature. As a young man, Wordsworth attended Cambridge University. At the age of 25, he met Samuel Coleridge, and 2 years later he officially began his career as a poet. Despite many difficult times he faced in his life, he continued to build his success as a poet. By 1843, he was the Poet Laureate of Great Britain. He died at the age of 80. As I mentioned before, it is obvious by his poetry that Wordsworth appreciated nature and the common everyday things of life. He believed that nature could influence the ideology of a society in a positive way. One of the ways he tried to show the importance of seeing beyond all the clutter of Augustan poetry was by writing about common people and normal activities. Many scholars believe Wordsworth was also attempting to introduce the idea that nature was an educator and books were not the most important method needed to educate society. The Idiot Boy is one of Wordsworth's poems that depict the importance of the common things of life. This poem may seem like a relatively simple story. A mother puts her disabled son on a horse and sends him to ask the doctor to come and tend to his sick neighbor. The son does not return as expected. His mother becomes very worried. She goes searching for her son and finds him quietly sitting on his grazing horse. The sick neighbor improves and goes in search of the mother and son. They find each other and all happily return home together. Many scholars believe Wordsworth was addressing some very important points in this poem. Let's look at the poem and then we will cover a few of those points. The Idiot Boy. 'Tis 8 o'clock, a clear March night. The moon is up, the sky is blue. The owlet in the moonlight air shouts from nobody knows where. He lengthens out his lonely shout. Halloo, halloo, a long halloo. Why bustle thus about your door? What means this bustle, Betty Foy? Why are you in this mighty fret? And why on horseback have you set him whom you love, your idiot boy? Scarcely a soul is out of bed. Good Betty, put him down again. His lips with joy, they burr at you. But Betty, what has he to do with stirrup, saddle, or with rein? Here the speaker's emphasizing how Betty Foy treats her son. She makes him rest often, and he is not given many responsibilities. He responds with happiness to her. The speaker wonders why Betty Foy would send him on such an errand as this. But Betty's bent on her intent for her good neighbor Susan Gale. Old Susan, she who dwells alone, is sick and makes a piteous moan, as if her very life would fail. There's not a house within a mile, no hand to help them in distress. Old Susan lies abed in pain, and sorely puzzled are the twain, for what she ails they cannot guess. And Betty's husband at the wood, where by the week he doth abide, a woodman in the distant vale, or valley, there's none to help poor Susan Gale. What must be done? What will betide? And Betty from the lane has fetched her pony that is mild and good, whether he be in joy or pain, feeding at will along the lane, or bringing faggots, bundles of sticks, from the wood. And he is all in travelling trim, and by the moonlight Betty Foy has on the well-girt saddle set, the like was never heard of yet, him whom she loves, her idiot boy. And he must post, travel with haste, without delay, across the bridge and through the dale, or valley, and by the church and o'er the down, treeless upland, to bring a doctor from the town, or she will die, old Susan Gale. There is no need of boot or spur, there is no need of whip or wand, for Johnny has his holly bough, and with a hurly-burly now, he shakes the green bough in his hand. And Betty o'er and o'er has told the boy who is her best delight, both what to follow, what to shun, what do, and what to leave undone, how turn to left, and how to right. Here the speaker is showing that Betty Foy has taught her son well. She has spent time training him. And Betty's most especial charge was, Johnny, Johnny, mind that you come home again, nor stop at all, come home again, whate'er befall. My Johnny, do, I pray you do. To this did Johnny answer make, both with his head and with his hand, and proudly shook the bridle too, and then his words were not a few, which Betty well could understand. And now that Johnny is just going, though Betty's in a mighty flurry, she gently pats the pony's side, on which her idiot boy must ride, and seems no longer in a hurry. But when the pony moved his legs, oh, then for the poor idiot boy, for joy he cannot hold the bridle, for joy his head and heels are idle, he's idle all for very joy. And while the pony moves his legs, in Johnny's left hand you may see the green bough motionless and dead, the moon that shines above his head is not more still and mute than he. His heart it was so full of glee, that till full 50 yards were gone, he quite forgot his holly-whip, and all his skill in horsemanship. Oh, happy, happy, happy John! And while the mother, at the door, stands fixed, her face with joy o'erflows, proud of herself and proud of him, she sees him in his travelling trim. How quietly her Johnny goes! The silence of her idiot boy, what hopes it sends to Betty's heart! He's at the guide post, he turns right. She watches till he's out of sight, and Betty will not then depart. Burr, burr, now Johnny's lips they burr, as loud as any mill or near it. Meek as a lamb, the pony moves, and Johnny makes the noise he loves, and Betty listens, glad to hear it. The burring that Johnny makes seems to be his sign of happiness. His mother recognizes what the burring means, and she is happy as well. Away she hies, to go quickly, to Susan Gale, her messengers in merry tune. The owlets hoot, the owlets kurr, and Johnny's lips they burr, 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 and on he goes beneath the moon. His steed and he right well agree, for of this pony there's a rumour, that should he lose his eyes and ears, and should he live 1,000 years, he never will be out of humour. Here the speaker's implying that the pony was playful and full of tricks. But then he is a horse that thinks, and when he thinks his pace is slack. Now, though he knows poor Johnny well, yet for his life he cannot tell what he has got upon his back. So through the moonlight lanes they go, and far into the moonlight dale, or valley, and by the church, and o'er the down, treeless upland, to bring a doctor from the town, to comfort poor old Susan Gale. And Betty, now at Susan's side, is in the middle of her story, what speedy help her boy will bring, with many a most diverting thing, of Johnny's wit and Johnny's glory. And Betty, still at Susan's side, by this time is not quite so flurried. Demure, with porringer, a low dish or cup, and plate, she sits as if in Susan's fate her life and soul were buried. Here Betty Foy is found attending carefully to Susan Gale. As we will see in the next stanza, Betty finds much delight in trying to cheer Susan Gale by telling stories about Johnny's accomplishments. But Betty, poor good woman, she, you plainly in her face may read it, could lend out of that moment's store 5 years of happiness or more to any that might need it. But yet I guess that now and then with Betty all was not so well, and to the road she turns her ears, and thence full many a sound she hears, which she to Susan will not tell. Poor Susan moans, poor Susan groans, as sure as there's a moon in heaven, cries Betty, he'll be back again, they'll both be here, 'tis almost 10, both will be here before 11. Poor Susan moans, poor Susan groans, the clock gives warning for 11, 'tis on the stroke, he must be near, quoth, or said, Betty, and will soon be here, as sure as there's a moon in heaven. The clock is on the stroke of 12, and Johnny is not yet in sight. The moon's in heaven as Betty sees, but Betty is not quite at ease, and Susan has a dreadful night. And Betty, half an hour ago, on Johnny vile reflections cast, a little idle sauntering thing, with other names an endless string, but now that time is gone and past. Betty Foy becomes angry and upset that Johnny has still not returned. However, the last line indicates she is no longer angry at Johnny, but instead is becoming very worried. And Betty's drooping at the heart. That happy time all past and gone. How can it be he is so late? The doctor, he has made him wait. Susan, they'll both be here anon, in a short time. And Susan's growing worse and worse, and Betty's in a sad quandary. And then there's nobody to say if she must go or she must stay. She's in a sad quandary. The clock is on the stroke of 1, but neither doctor nor his guide appears along the moonlight road. There's neither horse nor man abroad, and Betty's still at Susan's side. Betty Foy is torn between going in search of her son and staying to care for Susan Gale. And Susan now begins to fear of sad mischances not a few, that Johnny may perhaps be drowned, or lost perhaps and never found, which they must both forever rue, regret or sorrow. She prefaced half a hint of this with "God forbid it should be true." At the first word that Susan said, cried Betty, rising from the bed, "Susan, I'd gladly stay with you. I must be gone, I must away. Consider, Johnny's but half wise. Susan, we must take care of him, if he is hurt in life or limb." "Oh, God forbid!" poor Susan cries. Betty Foy begins thinking of all the things that could have happened to Johnny. At Betty's mention of her fears, Susan Gale becomes alarmed as well. "What can I do?" says Betty, going. "What can I do to ease your pain? Good Susan, tell me, and I'll stay. I fear you're in a dreadful way, but I shall soon be back again." "Nay, Betty, go, good Betty, go. There's nothing that can ease my pain." Then off she hies, to go quickly, but with a prayer, that God poor Susan's life would spare, till she comes back again. So through the moonlight lane she goes, and far into the moonlight dale, or valley. And how she ran, and how she walked, and all that to herself she talked, would surely be a tedious tale. In high and low, above, below, in great and small, in round and square, in tree and tower was Johnny seen, in bush and brake, ferns or brambles, in black and green. 'Twas Johnny, Johnny, everywhere. Here the speaker is likely implying that Betty Foy kept imagining she saw Johnny. And while she crossed the bridge there came a thought with which her heart is sore. Johnny perhaps his horse forsook, to hunt the moon within the brook, and never will be heard of more. Now is she high upon the down, treeless upland, alone amid a prospect, a view or scene, wide. There's neither Johnny nor his horse, among the fern or in the gorse, or a shrub. There's neither doctor nor his guide. O saints, what is become of him? Perhaps he's climbed into an oak, where he will stay till he is dead, or, sadly, he has been misled, and joined the wandering gypsy folk. Or him that wicked pony's carried to the dark cave the goblins' hall, or in the castle he's pursuing, among the ghosts his own undoing, or playing with the waterfall. Here the narrator is imagining what may have happened to the idiot boy. One scholar believes the narrator's imagination has likely been influenced by reading German tragedies. At poor old Susan then she railed, revile or scold, while to the town she posts, travels with haste, away. If Susan had not been so ill, alas! I should have had him still, my Johnny, till my dying day. Poor Betty, in this sad distemper, the doctor's self could hardly spare. Unworthy things she talked, and wild. Even he, of cattle the most mild, the pony had his share. Here the speaker refers to the agitated state of mind that Betty Foy was in. She blamed the doctor and the pony for Johnny's absence. But now she's fairly in the town, and to the doctor's door she hies, goes quickly. 'Tis silence all on every side, the town so long, the town so wide, is silent as the skies. And now she's at the doctor's door, she lifts the knocker, rap, rap, rap. The doctor at the casement, a hinged window, shows his glimmering eyes that peep and doze, and one hand rubs his old night cap. "Oh, doctor, doctor, where's my Johnny? I'm here. What is it you want with me? Oh, sir, you know, I'm Betty Foy, and I have lost my poor dear boy. You know him you often see. He's not so wise as some folks be. The devil takes his wisdom, said the doctor, looking somewhat grim. What, woman, should I know of him? And grumbling, he went back to bed. Oh, woe is me, oh, woe is me, here will I die, here will I die. I thought to find my lost one here, but he is neither far nor near. Oh, what a wretched mother I. By now Betty Foy is very upset and begins blaming herself for the situation. She stops, she stands, she looks about. Which way to turn she cannot tell. Poor Betty, it would ease her pain if she had heart to knock again. The clock strikes 3, a dismal knell. Then up along the town she hies, goes quickly. No wonder if her senses fail. This piteous news so much it shocked her, she quite forgot to send the doctor to comfort poor old Susan Gale. And now she's high upon the down, treeless upland, and she can see a mile of road. Oh, cruel, I'm almost 60, such night as this was ne'er before. There's not a single soul abroad. She listens, but she cannot hear the foot of horse, the voice of man. The streams with softest sound are flowing. The grass, you almost hear it growing. You hear it now, if e'er you can. The owlets through the long blue night are shouting to each other still, fond lovers, yet not quite hobnob, to socialize on friendly terms. They lengthen out the tremulous sob that echoes far from hill to hill. Poor Betty now has lost all hope. Her thoughts are bent on deadly sin. A green-grown pond she just has passed, and from the brink she hurries fast, lest she should drown herself therein. Here we see Betty is becoming more and more desperate. As she passes a stagnant pond, she quickens her step because she is beginning to contemplate suicide, and she fears that her desperation may drive her to it. And now she sits her down and weeps, such tears she never shed before. Oh dear, dear pony, my sweet joy, oh carry back my idiot boy, and we will ne'er o'erload thee more. A thought is come into her head. The pony he is mild and good, and we have always used him well. Perhaps he's gone along the dell, or small grassy valley, and carried Johnny to the wood. Then up she springs, as if on wings. She thinks no more of deadly sin. If Betty 50 ponds should see, the last of all her thoughts would be to drown herself therein. Here Wordsworth emphasizes a point that one scholar believes is alluded to elsewhere throughout the poem. Notice that in the next number of stanzas reality seems distant and meanings seem unclear. O reader, now that I might tell what Johnny and his horse are doing, what they've been doing all this time, oh could I put it into rhyme, a most delightful tale pursuing. Perhaps, and no unlikely thought, he with his pony now doth roam the cliffs and peaks so high that are to lay his hands upon a star, and in his pocket bring it home. Perhaps he's turned himself about, his face unto his horse's tail, and still and mute, in wonder lost, all silent as a horseman ghost, he travels slowly down the vale, or valley. And now, perhaps, is hunting sheep, a fierce and dreadful hunter he. Yon valley, now so trim and green, in 5 months' time should he be seen, a desert wilderness will be. Perhaps, with head and heels on fire, and like the very soul of evil, he's galloping away, away, and so will gallop on for always or ever, the bane, death, destruction, of all that dread the devil. The speaker seems to be imagining what he believes the idiot boy may have been experiencing. However, in the next couple of stanzas, Wordsworth seems to be mocking other poets by using the over-sophistication many of them used. I to the Muses, careful thoughts, have been bound these 14 years by strong indentures. O gentle Muses, let me tell but half of what to him befell. He surely met with strange adventures. O gentle Muses, is this kind? Why will ye thus my suit repel? Why of your further aid bereave me? And can ye thus unfriended leave me, ye Muses, whom I love so well? One scholar believes Wordsworth is criticizing the amount of time scholars spent studying or musing, as he calls it here. The scholar believes this is very evident in this part of the poem. There are other places that Wordsworth complicates the wording simply to keep the meter flowing. He is likely once again showing how unnecessary he believed many of the expectations were for poetry. Who's yon, that, near the waterfall, which thunders down with headlong force, beneath the moon, yet shining fair, as careless as if nothing were, sits upright on a feeding horse? Unto his horse, there feeding free, he seems, I think, the rein to give. Of moon or stars he takes no heed. Of such we in romances read, 'tis Johnny, Johnny, as I live. And that's the very pony too. Where is she? Where's Betty Foy? She hardly can sustain her fears. The roaring waterfall she hears, and cannot find her idiot boy. Your pony's worth his weight in gold. Then calm your terrors, Betty Foy. She's coming from among the trees, and now all full in view she sees him whom she loves, her idiot boy. And Betty sees the pony too. Why stand you thus, good Betty Foy? It is no goblin, 'tis no ghost, 'tis he whom you so long have lost, he whom you love, your idiot boy. She looks again, her arms are up, she screams, she cannot move for joy. She darts, as with a torrent's force, she almost has o'erturned the horse, and fast she holds her idiot boy. And Johnny burrs and laughs aloud, whether in cunning or in joy, I cannot tell, for while he laughs, Betty a drunken pleasure quaffs. Drink a large amount quickly, to hear again her idiot boy. And now she's at the pony's tail, and now is at the pony's head, on that side now, and now on this, and, almost stifled with her bliss, a few sad tears does Betty shed. She kisses o'er and o'er again him whom she loves, her idiot boy. She's happy here, is happy there, she is uneasy everywhere, her limbs are all alive with joy. She pats the pony, where or when, she knows not, happy Betty Foy. The little pony glad may be, but he is milder far than she, you hardly can perceive his joy. Oh, Johnny, never mind the doctor, you've done your best, and that is all. She took the reins, when this was said, and gently turned the pony's head from the loud waterfall. By this the stars were almost gone, the moon was setting on the hill, so pale you scarcely looked at her. The little birds began to stir, though yet their tongues were still. The pony, Betty, and her boy wind slowly through the woody dale, or valley, and who is she, betimes abroad, that hobbles up the steep rough road? Who is it but old Susan Gale? Long time lay Susan lost in thought, and many dreadful fears beset her, both for her messenger and nurse. And as her mind grew worse and worse, her body, it grew better. She turned, she tossed herself in bed. On all sides doubts and terrors met her. Point after point did she discuss, and while her mind was fighting thus, her body still grew better. Alas, what is become of them? These fears can never be endured. I'll to the wood, the word scarce said, did Susan rise up from her bed, as if by magic cured. Away she goes up hill and down, and to the wood at length is come. She spies her friends, she shouts a greeting. Oh me, it is a merry meeting, as ever was in Christendom. People who are Christians. The owls have hardly sung their last, while our four travellers homeward wend, or travel. The owls have hooted all night long, and with the owls began my song, and with the owls must end. For while they all were travelling home, cried Betty, "Tell us, Johnny, do, where all this long night have you been? What have you heard? What have you seen?" And, Johnny, mind you, tell us true. Now Johnny all night long had heard the owls in tuneful concert strive. No doubt, too, he the moon had seen, for in the moonlight he had been from 8 o'clock till 5. And thus to Betty's question he made answer like a traveller bold. His very words I give to you. The cocks did crow, to whoo, and the sun did shine so cold. Thus answered Johnny in his glory, and that was all his travel's story. William Wordsworth, 1798. Many did not receive Wordsworth's poem very well at all. One problem many people had with it was how Wordsworth portrayed the idiot boy. At this time, people with disabilities were not valued by society. They were said to be incurable, and some thought them to be repulsive. Some scholars believe that Wordsworth was challenging the mindset of society by purposefully portraying the idiot boy as someone who was teachable and could be educated. Wordsworth's idea that a disabled person could be a benefit to society was contrary to what many believed was possible for someone like the idiot boy. One scholar wrote that Coleridge believed Wordsworth was attempting to bring charm to the everyday things of life and introduce ideas that were contrary to the thinking of his society. However, another scholar wrote that Coleridge felt Wordsworth would have been met with better reception for this poem if he had depicted the idiot boy as being beautiful. This scholar believes Wordsworth may have purposefully not portrayed the idiot boy as being beautiful in order to emphasize the importance that all people with disabilities, whether handsome or not, deserve love and appreciation. Some scholars believe Wordsworth was also using the poem to emphasize his idea that nature is a very important part of education. If we look early in the poem, before Johnny's experience in nature, when Betty Foy was preparing to send her son for the doctor, Wordsworth writes, "To this did Johnny answer make, both with his head and with his hand, and proudly shook the bridle too, and then his words were not a few, which Betty well could understand." These lines do not make it totally clear whether Johnny was able to speak, but some scholars believe Wordsworth is indicating that Johnny could not speak. However, after Johnny's encounter with nature, in the closing stanza of the poem, Wordsworth seems to be implying that Johnny could now speak. Wordsworth writes, "And thus to Betty's question he made answer like a traveller bold. His very words I give to you. The cocks did crow, to whoo, and the sun did shine so cold. Thus answered Johnny in his glory, and that was all his travel's story." One scholar believes that although the words Johnny seemed to be speaking appear to be nonsense, Johnny may have been unable to fully and clearly express the height of his experience in nature. This final stanza may have been Wordsworth's attempt to portray the positive effect that nature has on those who take the time to enjoy it. Another poem written by Wordsworth indicates the importance he placed on spending time in nature and the benefit he believed the individual would experience by doing this. The name of this poem is Expostulation and Reply. Expostulation means earnest or kindly protest. In the poem, Wordsworth is found in the country enjoying nature. The poem opens with a kindly protest made against Wordsworth by his friend Matthew, who happened upon Wordsworth. The poem closes with Wordsworth's reply to Matthew. Let's look at the poem. Expostulation and Reply. Why, William, on that old grey stone, thus for the length of half a day? Why, William, sit you thus alone, and dream your time away? Where are your books, that light bequeathed, passed on, to beings else forlorn and blind? Up, and drink the spirit breathed from dead men to their kind. You look round on your mother earth, as if she for no purpose bore you, as if you were her firstborn birth, and none had lived before you. One morning thus, by Esthwaite Lake, when life was sweet, I knew not why, to my good friend Matthew spake, and thus I made reply. The eye it cannot choose but see, we cannot bid the ear be still, our bodies feel, where'er they be, against or with our will. Nor less I deem that there are powers, which of themselves our minds impress, that we can feed this mind of ours in a wise passiveness. Think you, mid all this mighty sum of things for ever speaking, that nothing of itself will come, but we must still be seeking? Then ask not wherefore, here, alone, conversing as I may, I sit upon this old grey stone, and dream my time away. William Wordsworth, 1798. Wise passiveness is the term that William Wordsworth has used to describe his idea of communing with nature. Scholars believe Wordsworth is addressing an issue that is still prevalent in our culture today, and that leisure time, such as Wordsworth was spending, rescues us from what one scholar calls the horrors of mass identity. This scholar also believes that Matthew does not seem to consider books a source of wisdom, but rather a collection of data. He writes that Wordsworth's drinking in of the natural beauty around him suggests receptivity to goodness, truth, and beauty that Matthew lacks. Matthew only seems to see the slothfulness of Wordsworth's approach. Another scholar wrote that he believes Wordsworth was using a biblical basis for the poem. He believes Wordsworth was using Matthew to depict the scribes and Pharisees when Matthew insists that books are the source of knowledge. It is obvious that Matthew is blinded in his search for education. However, unlike the scribes and Pharisees, Matthew seems to be open to Wordsworth's thoughts. If you are interested in further studying Wordsworth or would like to see the articles referred to in this video, I am including my sources used and sources consulted to assist you with that. Here are a few facts I have included about myself. I came to Gordon State College in the summer of 2014. I am an early childhood education major. English and history are two of my favorite subjects. I love college and the opportunities it provides for me. Random fact about me. Baking is one of my stress relievers. Come to my house during finals.